our group. So tweet that over to the group real quick. And to change links. All right, and I know you're not showing up, Stephen. You should be in the room in a second. Just hold on. You are here with me. Trust me on that.
Yeah, I can see my.
No, I'm moving my stuff around. I got too many windows open, so I apologize. We're going to get you here. Folks, just hang on tight. We're working on some technical snafu that we had starting out here today. I'm just sharing the post out. New show. I'll post edit this, Stephen. Oh, we're going to be able to do. Oh, that didn't work well. Okay. Let me edit that post maybe. Okay, everybody, we're almost there. I think I can close that one out, Stephen. We are here. I hope everyone can hear us. We're going to double check here in just a minute. Let's see what the viewers are. We have Stephen in here in the room with me. Stephen Healy from the UK, welcome.
Yeah, Leland.
This is across the pond. This is what happens when you're trying to go transcontinental, I suppose. We just run into issues. It's the way of the world sometimes. So let me make sure. True. It looks like we have everything recording properly. I don't see any issues on the front end. So far, the back end looks okay. We did send links out a little bit late because Stephen and I got in here and our event took off without us, which we thought was kind of odd. We sat there waiting for the window to open on FireTalk and nothing happened. And then the next thing we knew, we were closed out of our own show. So welcome to Across the Pond. And today we're doing it from my channel. Last week we did it from Stephen Healy's channel. So for those of you who don't know what we do, I'm here in the US. Stephen's over there in the UK. And across the pond, we're connecting somewhere in the middle. Today, I want you to, if you want to join in the conversation out on Twitter, please feel free to use the hashtag across the pond. It is used by another radio broadcasting network, but that's okay. We like the phrase, so we're just going to utilize that. You may see some Twitter feeds rolling on the screen here below Stephen, and that is just a representation of some of those that I threw in the queue. As we get newer ones to come in, they should start showing up in that feed. So, Stephen, again, welcome to the show. I hear it's raining over there in the UK today.
It is, yes. And it's also the weekend after the vote.
Yes, and how did that go for you guys? You need to tell me.
Right, okay, just a quick resume. The Great Britain voted last Thursday to leave the EU, and that means that in 2 years' time, we will not be part of the EU. Vote was close, 52% leave, 48% remain, and that is not what we expected.
Absolutely. And I suspect that from what I gathered coming up to that event, you were pretty much on the side that wanted to remain in the EU. Am I correct?
That's right. I mean, my postal vote was to remain. Okay. And most people I know the same. Situation was that anybody under 45, most of under 45 voted to remain, and over 45s voted to leave.
Really? So there was a demographic involved in that I wasn't expecting.
There is, yeah. We actually did a show on Blab last Friday, which was after the vote, to explain why it took place in the first place, and to decide the way forward.
Oh, okay.
At the moment, our Prime Minister's resigned. The leader of the opposition has been kicked out. And our MEP in Brussels today was booed out.
Wow.
So
lots of place inside the governmental buildings, you might say, and just all turmoil in a sense. But there's no rioting in the streets, right? This isn't become like a public display of, I mean, I know I've seen a lot of posts, Stevens, about let's just stop the hate and let's decide one way or the other. Now that we've made the vote, how are we going to handle it? Which I think is the right approach, that we can't expect, this hatred for not getting our way one way or the other to continue. And I'm not obviously pointing any fingers here, Stephen. This is just the fact that I've seen these posts out there. So I can only imagine.
The Leave campaign were asked last Friday what their plans were for the future. And they said, we don't have any.
Wow. We
haven't worked out what will happen when we leave the EU. The government should have done that.
I don't know about that. It sounds to me like it was the other way around, but
well, it should have been. It's just totally crazy.
Yeah.
We're living in interesting times. There are no riots, but there are marches in the major cities. Scotland have decided that they're going to become independent again. They're going to vote again on independence. So Scotland would leave. Northern Ireland want to join up with Southern Ireland, and they're going to have a vote on that.
Wow.
So at the end of the day, we could just have England and Wales, and it's the disunited kingdom.
Right.
You couldn't write, if you're writing a series about the breakup of a country, this would be the plot. And it's just incredible.
Well, maybe you need to redirect your programming of your book there to another topic, maybe. You surely
it certainly makes for an interesting episode. Yeah.
In case you don't know,
and then to cap it all, last night, our English football team was beaten 2-1 by Iceland. Or part-timers.
Man, the country's falling apart. Your football team's not winning, and it's raining. You can't get much worse than that, Stephen.
And things can only get better.
Yeah, and just for those who understand that football in the UK is obviously not what we believe football is over here, that they call more of a sport where we carry a leather egg around. This is a chart behind me that actually shows how people across the globe view football, quote, and other, obviously, if you look up into the U.S. here above my head, we call it soccer. Actually, over there in Australia, they call it soccer also. And there's just some very close neighbors of yours that call it soccer there. Am I correct, Stephen?
Yeah, sorry. I've got situation. Just give me a second.
Yeah, fine. No, this show is impromptu. We don't.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I've got a situation where I've got echoes.
Oh, are you getting an echo? All right. Is it my voice? Try closing here. I know what it is, Stephen. Let me turn on. It's my fault. It was my error. I left my volume on in the window that Stephen's coming to us from. So hold on a second. I'm going to shrink you down for just a second so I can turn off my audio. There we go. This is what you run into now. How's that? Is that better?
That's a lot better.
Okay. That was my error. I was still broadcasting sound to the platform that I'm bringing Stephen into this show from, which is actually room.co. Stephen and I were kind of poking around a little bit before the show to see which was going to work better. I've used Appearin in the past. I had some sound issues, so I had to figure those out, and that may be why we missed our window for our broadcast in one way or another, but I didn't see it. I had the window open. And then we realized something else while we were out there. And I'm just going to bring this up real quick, Stephen, before we move forward.
Yeah, surely.
FireTalk, who are the actual owners of FireTalk. FireTalk's been around since I remember when. I used to get out onto their platform several times, honestly, a week. And it was more of an audio queue up chat room where you could go in, get into the chat room. You could discuss and chat with people that you associated with or people you didn't know based on topics of discussion. And then you could raise your hand to get on the mic, and you could sit on the mic for a few minutes or what have you and speak your piece and then let the next person talk. Well, we just went out there today before the show and realized they now have video chat. So that was kind of interesting, and we were looking it over. Free of charge, but they do have paid platforms from that point forward, which are very reasonable, $3.99 a month up to $29.99 a monk. So if you're interested in checking out who created FireTalk, where they came from originally, go check out PalTalk, PalTalk.com, and take a look for yourself. See what you think.
Yep.
So Stephen,
one of the original chat programs.
Oh, for sure, right? So
from back in the day.
Other than that, we had some discussions going on last week. where were we? Let me get to my page. I believe I have a link here still. That was under 18 things that will make you miss your hometown while you're here in America, is what the article was about. It was on BuzzFeed a couple months back. And I'm not going to share the window like we did last time, because that would mean I would have to close you out of the screen, Stephen. So I'm going to bring up topics here, and maybe you can just help me discuss them. We talked about the electrical outlets. We talked about Boots Health Store and the fact that they don't sell cigarettes and liquor in their pharmacy, which I think is probably a good thing. Now, can you tell me, what is the NHS? Is that
right? Okay, National Health Service is our healthcare system, free at the point of delivery to everyone in Great Britain.
So it's similar to what Canada does, I would expect.
Yeah, there's just simply no charge.
And it's something that we expected, I believe, from what we were granted as, quote, Obamacare. Yep. Now, that has not been the case at all. We actually discovered, my wife and I, when we went to apply for Obamacare, or the healthcare, national healthcare system, is really what you're referring to here. We discovered that it was going to actually cost us more than we made a month in order to be a participant in that system. We were kind of shocked. Now, I know that was in the beginning, and there was a lot of turmoil in the application process and the way you could get the insurance itself. So I have not reapplied to see where it's gone since then. This was a couple of years ago. We were running the detail shop, and we had a limited income because we had a lot of overhead there. So we referenced that income, and yet once we found out the price they wanted to charge us for a national healthcare system, and if we don't join up, we're charged penalties on our income tax at the end of the year, up to $750 if we don't sign up. Now, do you have that same similar penalty if you don't join the social program?
No, you do. But since its inception, it's been funded by a tax, which is called national insurance.
Makes sense.
And national insurance is based on your monthly salary as a percentage, and it's paid into a central fund. And that central fund is then used to run the whole of the health system throughout the UK.
And that makes perfect sense if you ask me. That would be the most appropriate way, I would think, to fund a healthcare system, would be to charge a minimal percentage of tax based on income and deliver it to those who need it as the time goes on. And I guess we didn't get that lucky over here. We're still waiting for that to flourish. So I'm going to look into that again this year, Stephen, because it did come up in topic. Now, after that, it says something about there's also no sales tax in the UK. And I found that really compelling because I'd never heard that. I never knew that.
We
it's
do
included in the price is what I mean. Like if I see a candy bar for $1, the tax is already included in that $1 that I see on the shelf, correct? Is that how that works?
That's exactly how it works.
Okay. Yeah. Not the case here.
Oh, right. Okay.
Every state you go to has a different percentage of sales tax that's associated with the items for retail. So here in Michigan, where I live currently, the sales tax is 6%. It used to be 4%. So we would pay 4 cents on the dollar for everything that rang up on the register when we went to check out. We would have to add and keep in our mind, like we could gather all the stuff we had, but if we had $100 worth of stuff, we were going to pay $4 in sales tax when we got to the counter. And now it's $6, obviously. And some states go as high as 8 or 9%. So it fluctuates depending on where you're shopping. You don't really know what you're going to pay for a sales tax. So I found that pretty interesting.
Our sales tax is 20%.
20?
Yep. VAT is 20%. It doesn't apply to all goods, but when it does, it's 20%, which goes to the central government.
We don't pay tax on food or drink.
Same here.
Okay.
Well, don't pay tax on food. Alcoholic drinks.
Yes, alcohol.
Taxable.
Well, if we go to like pay at a bar or a pub or something like that, it's a flat charge. You come in, they charge you $3.50 for a beer or whatever, then that's what you pay. You don't pay tax on that money. They just ask you for the $3.50 and you pay it. So because there are several federal liquor taxes that are imposed on the bars that sell liquor, anyone, a store, whatever. There's a lot of taken through the I can't think of the name now. The Drug Administration over, not the FDA, but the Firearm, Tobacco, and the FT. Okay. Oh man, I'm slipping bad today, Stephen. I can't remember who this. Firearms, tobacco, and all that other stuff. So that's where we have to pay our tax ahead of time. Next on that list is something about the BBC. I think we've all seen it. Over here, we have what's called PBS in most states, or the Public Broadcasting System. BBC is a very similar setup, but not similar. Can you explain why it's so much different than what we do?
The British Broadcasting Corporation, or the BBC, has 4 television channels and 7 radio channels, which are broadcast nationally, and it's funded by a license fee.
Okay.
And if you want to watch television, any television, you've got to pay the license fee.
Okay.
And it is, to all intents and purposes, totally independent. So the news is independent, and it also funds drama and fact-based documentaries, a whole range of programs.
Mm-hmm. So in a sense, like for us, we don't, they're supposedly income based, but it's all based on donation from its viewers.
Okay.
So they do what are called pledge drives every 6 months or so, and they'll send out flyers and mailers and stuff to people who are regular contributors, but they live based on contribution, not on a tax. Obviously, we pay for our cable television, which I expect. Do you have the separate affiliations for the larger networks that you're paying for cable to watch cable TV, or is that something?
Yes, if you're paying for Virgin or Netflix or anything of that sort, then it's an additional fee.
That's what I figured. But as far as
if you have a television, irrespective of whether you watch the BBC or not, you pay a license, and that license is £145 or $200 a year.
So you have no free television whatsoever, except, well, it sounds like none whatsoever.
None whatsoever. Well, if you have got a television set, and you use it, you've got to pay $200 a year.
Wow. Okay, now that is totally different from
now.
It
weird. Used to be that you could watch the replays on the web, legally without a license.
Okay,
that's going to change.
Now, the difference here is we actually have what are known as public stations, which are normally our local affiliates from the larger networks. Like we have ABC, CBS, NBC, some of the big conglomerates, obviously the Ted Turner organizations and things like that, that have run on free airwaves since the 50s when television was first a big thing here in the States. And what they ended up doing was they went from an analog signal to a digital signal. And when they did so, it basically took away all those free signals that we were picking up with our TV antennas, which caused us to go buy converters, which could be attached to our older analog televisions. But now with the fact that they don't create analog televisions any longer, and now it's all digital, you can buy a digital television with a digital receiver, but you can still buy a digital amplified antenna. And I had one for a little while just recently. It was called the Leaf. It was a flat panel piece of rubber that you stuck to the window, and it would pick up signals of the local television channels in high def because they broadcast digitally in high definition. So we were able to pick up about 22 free channels, no cost to us whatsoever. All we have to do is turn on our TV and plug in the antenna, and we could watch up to 1080p in high def. But if we wanted anything beyond the local channels, the news networks, and what they play on, the regular itinerary of feature shows, which are obviously a big, significant part of what's being broadcast here in the States, it didn't cost us anything. So that is a significant difference. It's interesting.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of stations here which are free to view, but you can't do it without a television set, and you can't have a television set and not pay a license.
That's wild. Sure got you one way coming and going in that regard, if you ask me. It's hard to say, but they don't ask for money. besides they don't go out and do these fundraiser things on TV to try and get you to send in a contribution. So that's a big difference. Now, the last few things on here I thought were kind of, and I'll stick to a couple. I'm going to skip a couple first before we get to the end of this one, Stephen. So I'm on number 16 if you're following along here. You guys, it says here that you don't have political ads on television, or at least they're heavily regulated. So during this whole Brexit thing, there wasn't really a lot being broadcast on television to influence voters. Is that
no? You can't run ads when you want.
Okay.
They're run to a schedule. So the Electoral Commission agrees when each party can do a party political broadcast, and you've got to stick to it. They also tell each party how much they can spend overall.
I'll be darned.
So it's funded by the government. They don't have to collect contributions, although they can, but they can only spend X amount. That means that nobody can outspend anybody else.
That's kind of cool. I like that idea. That's not a bad idea, really. I wish they could do that to the folks here, because you get sick of seeing the same, and I am Barry Saunders and I approve this message kind of broadcasting that we see all the time. And, each one is usually bashing the other. Is that something you see at all during these broadcasts?
Yes, we've had a lot of negative policies recently.
And that's what it becomes, is negative campaigning. And I think it's ridiculous.
Indeed.
It's ridiculous. And what is this? So the political party broadcast is one time it'll be the labor union or the Labor Party, I guess you'd say. And the conservatives and the
Liberal Democrats.
Okay, Liberal Democrats. That's what I figured.
UKIP.
Yeah. And then, of course,
Greens.
And you don't have a Congress like we do, obviously, but you have a parliament, which still has not voted on this whole Brexit thing, if I'm correct.
That's correct. They're still yet to vote.
But where do they stand right now?
But we don't have a prime minister. We don't have a leader of the opposition. So nobody can do anything.
Wow.
We're in nothing can happen yet.
So who's running for prime minister? Who could replace him? Is there, like, we have a second in command, like a vice that could step up, or no? There's no one there to take that place?
It's a totally new contest, because it's felt that the next prime minister should be somebody who was in the Leave campaign. Okay. Which cuts out half the candidates.
I'll bet.
Yeah, because they voted Remain.
I'll be darned.
And you can't run a Lead strategy if you wanted to stay.
Exactly.
So there are people declaring themselves, but at the moment there's only a couple, and we're waiting for the main ones to say what they're going to do.
And now that's also going to affect those British citizens or any of those in the UK who are on visa or work visas. What are they going to do?
It's a situation is, if you're on an EU visa, you're okay for the next 2 years. Well, everything gets sorted out. Then it's on a country by country basis, and you may well find that you no longer have the right to work in the UK.
Wow.
Which will affect hundreds of thousands of people.
Certainly.
And of course, we have UK citizens working throughout Europe who will be in the same position.
Okay.
So let's put it this way, I voted Remain.
Yeah.
And I can't understand what's going on, really.
Yeah, I don't blame you, Stephen. It's kind of the same way with what I see going on in the U.S. I am just flabbergasted with the things that are taking place. There's so much hate in the air right now between various parties, and it will continue to. It was just like the other, not even last week, the Democrats, the Liberal Democrats, sat in or performed a sit-in over gun control, as a means to try and get people to do more when it comes to creating laws for, law-abiding citizens to follow, of course. You usually don't run into a convict or a felon that's going to follow a gun control law. But in either regard, what ends up happening is we discover most of the people, a good significant number of those who did perform the sit-in, are gun carriers themselves. which was somewhat hypocritical. It's like, okay, we can own guns, but you can't, kind of attitude. And that was really kind of the last straw for a lot of the people over here who saw the sit-in. It's just not conducive to good politics in my eyes. I just don't see that working out. So where's the vote at right now at the parliament, though, Stephen? What are you looking to find moving ahead? Do they kind of have it? Have they talked about what they're going to vote on?
Nope. Nobody knows. There's no leadership. All running around like headless chickens. I hope to report something better next week.
I hear you.
When we've got a clearer idea.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
And I guess the last thing to discuss in that article was the fact that we tend to put a lot of things on our buildings. We see them all around here where I live in Corona, Michigan, being the first coal mine city in Michigan. It was the location of at least the first coal mine. The gentleman that used to sell coal from this location used the Shiawassee River and stopped at several of the Indian encampments that were along that river until the trains came through. And once the trains came through, it kind of shut down his whole bartering and trading process. He was getting like 10 cents a ton or whatever for coal at the time. And so we see a lot of these circa this labels on our buildings, and this town was established roughly in the 1840s, and for us, hey, that's old, right? But you guys got a lot older stuff than we do, right?
Well, you asked me earlier. Yes, we do. I mean, we can go back 2,000 years. I live very close to Stonehenge.
Oh, nice.
Which is a pretty old building.
Yeah, it's like 3,500 years old, isn't it? 3,500 BC.
Yeah. I mean, our architecture, some of it is thousands of years old. Yeah. Majority, though, is from the Middle Ages and onwards.
And that's interesting too, because you're aware of the fact that my family on my father's side, if I follow the Bests through several other Pringles, and then there's another building. I should have opened up Ancestry before we started here so I could follow through. But yeah, I might just do that while we're online here while we're talking. But my family owned several castles, and actually I think it's not King Richard, but I'm gonna go look, Stephen. While we're on,
okay,
if there's something comes to mind for you. Do you go to the actual soccer events, football events over there?
I support Burnley, but it's been a few years since I've been there.
Okay.
I tend to watch most of the soccer on television, and it was not an exciting evening yesterday when England played and got beat.
Well, I certainly didn't be on your parade today. That was not my intent. I'm in there right now. So what I want to see is I'm going to head over to my family tree here, and I may be able to do a screen share at some point, but I just wanted to bring up the names so that I could get an idea, or maybe you've heard some of these names in the past, because I know there's another, I got to get to the right end here. I need the overall tree, and then I can just take it from there. It takes a second. I'll get to my wife's side and then head over to me as one of the, because there's several chains on this here tree that we have that we're working on. And we've been working on it a while. I've traced it all the way back to Charlemagne, which is kind of interesting for sure. Okay, let me get to me. And what it tends to do, zoom in. Okay, if I take it down with my great-great-great-grandfather's side, there is a Pringle. And from there, I know you'll recognize this. The Laux, Loucks, or Laux is another spelling of that name.
Okay.
And there are also, get to it here. Or the other tree. There it is. Dibble is another big name. Nathan Dibble served in the Revolutionary War, and like I said last time we were here, my family actually served on both sides of the Revolutionary War. Some were very happy with the way the Brits were treating them, or even the fact that they were from Britain and decided that their lifestyle was perfectly adequate. They didn't need to fight the big guy, I guess you'd say. Bigelow's, that was it. So there is a building over on your end of things, and this takes me back to, it's Baguley's estate. The Baguley estate, I believe it's called.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with that building?
Baguley?
You got it.
No.
Richard Baguley is actually I gotta check the profile. Or Randall Baguley, I'm sorry, who died in 1578, is my 11th great grandfather. So there is a residence there in Cheshire, England.
Yeah.
And I'd love to come see it because I heard news that it's still there. It actually,
I believe it is, yes.
Yeah, it still exists.
Yes.
So that's something I'm kind of excited when I do get a chance to come over there, because he was born in Baguley, Cheshire, and I have several others in this, lengthy tree that I've created that, like I said, goes all the way back to Charlemagne. But I wanted to get on this one page that it's when I start to get into the kings. So we have Sir William de Baguley, and then as you continue through his reign, that goes up into Lord de Baguley, Willow. So this is in the 1100s here. And I can go a little further into the Masseys, which takes me over to, I'm sorry, the wrong chain here. Yeah, that's about it on that end. But I know there's another one that gets me into the king side of things, and I would have to make sure I get the right one. But it's exciting.
Did you say the Masses?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the Masses.
Can you Google?
I have Hammond and Elise, and Hammond the Fourth, Hammond the Third.
Right.
The Massey takes me back to Guillaume, or how is that? Guillaume? How do you spell it? Guillaume, which is a Bellamy.
Guillaume,
okay. And that takes me into the Bolognas. We call that bologna here in the States, which gets me into
Bologna.
Yeah, and that gets me into Judith of France, Louis the First, Baldwin Flanders, several other. King Egbert is actually the one just below the King Ealdman of Kent, which takes me up into the Prince of Wessex, into the 700s, and that pretty much leads me on to Cendred of Wessex and continues. So I've taken it back into the 600s there.
Yeah.
Have you ever done your family tree over there, Stephen?
No, I haven't. No.
Really?
I understand. Fascinating topic.
Yeah, it is. I've always been
to find out where it came from. Just on the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
I've got another friend, Peter Stewart. You might have met him, and he's sent off for DNA results.
My wife wants.
And the DNA results he gets back will tell him where his ancestors came from.
And they say it's become
in terms of continents.
Yeah. My wife wants to do that really bad. And every now and then, Ancestry.com has a special, which is like $80. It's normally $100 and some dollars, or up to $200 to have it done. And they send you the swab, and you do the swab in your cheek, and then you shoot it back to them so that they can test your DNA with all of the million. They have over 1 million samples now, and as people continue to send in samples, it allows them to build a database of individuals. So from what it was 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, really, when they started the program, it was very inaccurate. But now it's come a long way since that time, and I've read up on it quite a bit to find out what it's all about. But that was pretty much
obviously, the more people that join, the more accurate it becomes.
Oh, sure. Just like anything, kind of like what we do here. The more people that join. Oh, here it is. I'm sorry. Alfred, King of England. That was the one I was looking for. You have a statue out there in the center of the Royal Palace, I believe, in Wantage, Oxfordshire. That
Oxfordshire, yeah.
Let me see if I can get the picture real quick. I'll show you the picture that I have. Well, I'm sure you could go anywhere. Let's get a quickie on Alfred the Great. And I've even found books of some of my ancestors who I was over at the store my wife's at right now, which is a Volunteers of America store, where they have a lot of stuff on sale right now. I found a book there one day when I was there, and it basically was a book of Charles the Bald. And he is my 35th great grandfather. And a picture of Alfred here. For some reason, it's not letting me type very well. I want wanted the statue at. There it is. Okay. Let me save this image so you can. Well, I'll do this. I'm gonna try to make this an image in VMix off to the side. I can add one more layer here, so I may be able to just throw it up on the screen real quick. It'll be interesting. So while I'm getting that, Stephen, what have you got planned for the rest of the week?
The rest of the week, if it's fine, I should be out in the garden.
We've been doing a little bit of gardening over here. What do you like to plant?
Yeah. I basically carrots, parsnips, potatoes, runner beans.
What are those?
Cucumber. Sorry?
When you said what kind of beans?
Runner.
Oh, runner beans.
We need to.
Yeah, I totally lost track of what you were saying there. Similar to what we do now, we're mostly doing flowering trees and such. With some, my daughter's doing really well with her squash and tomatoes, etc. She's got a lot of that stuff going on. Okay, let me just resize this real quick, Stephen, and I can make this happen. I had to go in and find a version of it that would work, and then I'm going to shrink it down. I've got to zoom the X up a little bit. I'm not going to crop it all that much, but I'm going to bring it in over my head rather than over your face. So it's going to come in on my face more so than your own. Actually, I might be able to sneak it in right between us. Let's try this. I'm going to see if we can get that in there right about there. That's pretty darn close. So that would be one of my great-great-grandfathers there in stone, you might say, or iron or bronze, whatever it's made of. Are you familiar with this statue?
No, I haven't been. I don't think so.
It's probably at a church somewhere, most likely, or a big cathedral of sorts. I think it's out in the middle of a cathedral, and I'll have to verify that with pictures and do a little Wikipedia search, but I just wanted to throw that out there so that you saw. So my family does exist over there. So we talked earlier, Stephen, and I had a coffee cake in my hand I was eating this morning, and I had the little, it had the little crumbles on top of it, like, you know, one of those little coffee treats that you buy. It was some fancy name thing that you buy in a box. And I brought up the word crumpet because honestly, I don't know if I've ever had a crumpet. What is a crumpet? Honestly.
It just so happens I wasn't going to describe it. You can see.
He's got a bag of them. Oh, the other way. There we go. Oh, so
in actual fact.
So it's like an English muffin. That's what we call an English muffin. Is it holes? It's aerated? Yeah.
There you are.
Now, is that sweet or is it just like a sourdough bread?
It's basically flour and yeast.
Okay. So it's a sourdough bread, pretty much.
And it's baked on a griddle.
Yeah.
Inside is circular.
I'll be darned. That's pretty much what we call an English muffin. Now
no, that's not a muffin.
No.
We can talk about muffins next week.
Muffin's a big old thing with fruit in it.
Right.
Yeah. Or chocolate.
You give me an excuse to go and buy some crumpets, which I'm going to cook in a moment.
Oh, you went and bought those after we talked about it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, Stephen.
They're brilliant fresh.
I'm going to have you email me one then when you're done toasting it. Make sure I get one. I've got some in the closet. I'll go. What do you put on your crumpets then?
Butter, jam, syrup, you name it.
I'm a big fan of the peanut butter and jelly toppings on those, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I also use those to make an egg and sausage sandwich.
Right.
Because McDonald's sells them for $3.50. I can make them for under $1. So I started making them here at home instead. And they're just really good. Yeah. I enjoy those a lot. So is there anything else you'd like to cover? I know we're coming up on the hour, but it doesn't mean we have to be here for an hour, Stephen. I think
no.
Playing around is always fun to do. Well, let's tell people where they can find it, unless you got something to go on. I don't know if you heard
I just have a link for you.
Oh, cool. And what do we
which I'm going to paste in, because you mentioned the name of Massey earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Which made me think of this.
Okay. I'm going to open this up and take a look at it. Dunham Massey. This is Oh, yeah, there's a very good chance. I know I've seen that building before,
All right.
Stephen.
Okay.
So I will have to look into that. I appreciate that. And there's a
That's
good
in Cheshire.
okay. And that's where I do
And
find a lot of my family over from that area.
Yeah.
Awesome. Very awesome. And it's interesting because I need to find out where I can do some research over there because I have some, I got to be honest with you, Stephen, some of my family over there were pretty ruthless. Okay? I've seen some of the write-ups about what they used to do back then, and the sword fighting and everything going on. Even they would go and hack somebody's head off or whatever, and I was like, man, that's quite a story to be telling about my family.
It's the Wild West 300 years before that.
Pretty much, yeah. I would agree with you there for the most part. And so I think we've covered everything else. Where can our guests and visitors find you, Stephen, out there on Twitter or FireTalk? Where's a good place?
Right. If you go to Google and you type in Stephen with a V and Healy, you'll find me.
Sounds good. Now, you can't always do the same with me, but it's starting to work that way. If you type in Leland Best in Google, you usually end up at the Best Western in Leland, Michigan. Sorry, I can't control that. They have a bigger advertising budget than I do, so they tend to strangle the words Best and Leland all together, and I can't do anything about it. So I do show up on page toward the bottom of the page or on page 2. I'm all over the place, but you can find me at Leland Best or at Leland Best Live out on Facebook. Here on Twitter or here on FireTalk, it's BCB Live, which you'll find as a featured show out on the front page, or here at firetalk.com/Leland Best. So, Stephen, once again, as always, great show. Thank you.
Indeed. Pleasure. I look forward to another show next week.
We'll be on Stephen's channel next week, so look for that Across the Pond that's going to be broadcast out just a few days before the show, probably by the weekend, if we get a lucky enough chance to be out there. Join us in our live streaming adventures as we continue to move along in the stream. Stephen's going to be finishing his book up soon, right? On live stream.
That's right. Hopefully by the end of the month.
Oh, wow. Awesome. And so
that's
look forward to that. All right,
then
buddy.
We can talk about
appreciate it. Get out of the rain.
Okay.
Right.
Take care, Leland.
Take care,
and everyone watches the replay.
We'll see you later. Cheers.
Cheers.